Lee Meyer, and I wanted to welcome Art Brock. And thank you, Art, for being a part of the Impact Economy Summit.
Hi, Tammy. Looking forward to it.
Wonderful. Yeah, I'm really excited about what's going to happen at this event. So to start us off, and just as a warm-up question, are you concerned about the state of the world today, Art?
Most certainly. I mean, I think it has become apparent to more and more people that we are on an unsustainable trajectory, and that trajectory is fueled by an economy that needs transforming. And for me, a lot of my work is focused on transforming both economic patterns at the level of currencies and stuff, and also social patterns at the level of new types of organizing and educating.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Do you think we can turn things around?
I do. I think we're poised on this sort of precipice where we really have the opportunity to make the right choices or not. And just my observation is that enough people are waking up to that new choices need to be made. And for me, the question is really about the timing. Can we turn some of these things around and build some of kind of the next infrastructure that we need before the current infrastructure just collapses in on itself because it's so unsustainable?
So yeah, you touched a little bit on the hows. How do you think we can turn this around? Maybe you can expand on that.
Well, for me, a lot of it boils down to social collective intelligence, the levels at which we operate with each other on large scale. So we fancy ourselves at the top of this evolutionary ladder, if you will, not recognizing that that nature builds on parts. So we have become cells, like cells, cells in organisms that are social organisms, our institutions, our governments, our corporations, and that kind of thing. And it's the patterns that we're creating at that level that are so unsustainable. And so the issue of changing individual consciousness isn't enough. It's actually the issue of changing these patterns, what fuels these patterns, and the tools that we use to coordinate on large scale. And so for me, a lot of my work is on those patterns and on the tools.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Art. Yeah, let's jump into that. What are the different roles that you've played in both new economy movements and the work that you do in the world?
I've made my living for the past a little more than 10 years really working in the alternative currency space, building alternative currency systems, not necessarily alternative money systems, because for me, currency is I'm reclaiming that word to be broader than just money, even though we use those terms interchangeably in English a lot. I think of it more as a mnemonic for it is current see, the ability to see currents or flows at the social level. We create symbol systems for accounting and tracking and managing and enabling certain patterns of flows, whether it be money, which enables exchanges of goods and services, or think about event tickets for the Super Bowl. You have, 250,000 people all coming into a space. You have a really complex flow to manage, but a ticket tells you who gets to get in and where they need to go, and allows you to have sort of distributed intelligence and control for everybody to get into the right seats. And we have these kinds of currencies, flow systems all over the place that we use to create social intelligence. And they end up being a leverage point for changing these patterns. Just like changing money would be a leverage point for changing the way businesses operate, because the businesses optimize themselves to the incentives. So when you have a cancerous currency that rewards patterns of greed, basically patterns of being a cancer, expanding yourself at the expense of your host, you get corporations behaving that way. It's built in to the tools that we're using to construct our social intelligence, which is why we need new tools. So that's a lot of the work that I do, is in building those systems. And there's some open source tools I'm building for kind of next economy, next internet next communication platform stuff. And then there's also learning how to use these things in healthy social patterns. So there's a social enterprise incubator, Emerging Leader Labs, that I've started, and we do fun experiments there on how to build great teams, social patterns, healthy dynamics, groups that can be highly functional. And one of the spinouts from that has actually been Agile Learning Centers, a kind of a new transformational educational model that is spreading really rapidly to help fix our broken education system, which is another kind of domain of broken social patterns.
There's so many pieces that need work, and thank you so much for investing your time and your effort in that, Art. That is amazing. Maybe you can share a little bit about the role that you're going to play at the summit.
Initially, I thought that I was just a participant or speaker, but because of these social tools and stuff that we developed, we're actually going to use some of them at the summit. So I'm going to be participating in some of the facilitation as well, especially of the breakout groups, kind of the unconference portions of the event, which we have happening kind of in twice-a-day cycles, morning and afternoon cycles. In particular, bringing a tool called game shifting, which is something that helps groups self-facilitate by making kind of the implicit social patterns and agreements that we all kind of have to walk around to negotiate how we're facilitating ourselves. It makes them explicit instead of implicit, so that you can use hand signals like a change up and then change settings, like do you get to just jump in and speak, or are we being facilitated, or are we going in a circle, or are we using a talking stick, or lots of different things that you can do to change patterns, which especially in an unconference, if you've ever gone to like an open space or an unconference type thing where a group is convening about something and somebody kind of hijacks the space, they're soapboxing, or they're doing something which is taking it off on a tangent, and the group doesn't always have tools to kind of bring itself back onto the track that most of the group thought they were supposed to be on. And so this helps with those tools. So that, anyway, I'm going to be participating in facilitation as well as bringing some of these social intelligence.
It is wonderful. I'm really looking forward to your sessions, and game shifting. It's critical when we're working in groups to be able to have those agreements about how we participate, and to have everyone know how they can really bring themselves. So thank you. That's awesome.
Just briefly about the kinds of things I'll be talking about are things like deep wealth, how to get beyond just the sort of superficial layers of wealth that are monetary, that are currencies that function like gambling tokens, all about transferring ownership before something loses value, or trying to gain things that are going to be in high demand, kind of a gambling market tokens, to the types of tools that actually make layers of relationship and connectedness and health below that visible. Because if we want to address some of the patterns that are unsustainable, we need our currencies to make those patterns visible at those deeper levels as well.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Art, maybe you can share a little bit about the motivation that you have. What motivates you to do this work? Can we just dive into that for a moment?
For me, there's kind of a deep sense of purpose and I don't know, like a calling to this, where I feel like a bunch of the work that I'm doing isn't really even my own. It's sort of something that's coming through me because it's wanted and needed, and somehow the universe sometimes speaks through me, because there's insights that I get or things that I do that I don't think come from my own knowledge base. So it feels like something I'm really deeply called to, but also the whole fact that we are kind of on this brink of unsustainability heading toward collapse, to me also kind of puts a little bit of a fire under my butt to motivate the timing of this. And so many people want to like fight the existing system rather than build the next healthy alternatives. And for me, there's something really beautiful about kind of our next step of evolution as humanity to operate at new levels of social collective intelligence, to create new kinds of social organisms. And how I picture it is, just like when cells got better at working together, created DNA and other kinds of signaling systems to coordinate, there was this Cambrian explosion of life forms, of different patterns, different multicellular organisms, a lot of which died out and didn't work. I think with some of the tools that I'm building, there's going to be a whole new explosion of new kinds of social patterns, new ways people can work together, most of which are going to work much better than our old ways, but many of which will still end up dying out as we get better and better at creating these patterns together. And that's something that's really inspiring to me, is ways that we can have a whole quantum leap in our capacities to coordinate and work together and live great lives.
Yes. I mean, we have these tools to communicate and to organize, and it really just takes our participation and testing it, kicking the tires and seeing what works.
We have parts of those tools, like we think of the internet as decentralized, but it's really only the routing protocol that's decentralized. There's still a lot of centralized aspects of it, and there's a lot of ways that small minorities of power people can shut down other things, like internet service providers can basically shut down the internet in a lot of ways. And so it's like we're close. We have parts of the tools, but there's other kinds of infrastructure needed to truly get to the point where people who want to create and do things together basically can't be stopped. It's kind of like a freedom of speech or expression, except it's more like a freedom of collaboration. There's a way to, which is one of the other things provided for, freedom of association and assembly, right, in the U.S. Constitution anyway. It's just taking that onto a digital level with no kind of centralized constraints.
Yes, that's true here in Canada as well. And so, yeah, let's talk about some of the questions that you'd like to dive into, or that you'd like to have answered in the summit.
One of the things that I'm looking forward to the most is actually that we're gathering a bunch of thought leaders in different, in related, connected, but different spaces. And it's not so much that I have big, broad questions that I don't feel like I'm already engaged in answering or have partial answers to. It's the way that being in dialogue with some of these other folks helps round out and complete some of the answers of how can we best work together? How do we get people to adopt these new kinds of tools? What are some of the sweet spot problems to solve which would really help these things spread? Things like that. There's a lot of fun exploration that happens when you bring people that are spending a lot of their life energy on these kinds of questions. You can really engage at a depth that it's hard to when it's kind of small talk with people that are not really engaged in this kind of inquiry. So for me, it's really the opportunity to go deep into how to make all these things work.
Yes, wonderful. And what are some of the actions that you'd like to see coming out of the summit?
For me, I would like to see a lot of new collaborative relationships. There's, a lot of things there from, P2P economy and new commons stuff and open value networks and our kind of distributed autonomous organization type tools that come out of Scepter and Streamscapes. I'd like to see us make some forays into how some of these things can start to play together. I don't think we'll necessarily actually have them working together at the end of that week, but at least be able to see some domains that we could work together and problems we could target together.
Wonderful. And are there people that you would love to see at the summit that you'd like to invite?
Yeah, other people that find themselves deeply engaged in this type of question, whether they are in more traditional organizations and want to be exposed to some of these kind of, more disruptive revolutionary things, or whether they're in other domains of the disruptive revolutionary stuff and want to figure out how their stuff connects in the mix as well. I'd love, you know, I'm not aware of anybody coming from Ethereum yet, and I think they've got a lot of ideas going in the right direction. I'd love to have some people from the Ethereum community there, and you know, frankly, some more P2P technology people there, because we're looking at P2P technology for citizen engagement, for currencies, for communication platforms, for, you know, all that type of stuff. Also, people maybe into some of the ways that things can work together, semantic web and API, and kind of people who are creating solutions for how things can work together more effectively and integrate. And also the storytellers, the people who, you know, they're not necessarily building the tools, but they are telling the stories, that they're, you know, going around and investigating what work is being done, and then being able to bring that work out into a story that people can hear.
Yes, yes. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate all of the work that you're doing ahead of the summit and just your approach to collaboration. I think that the ideas that you're bringing to the table, the way that you do your work in community is very powerful, and it's going to have an amazing impact at the impact economy. So thank you so much for being a part of it, and we look forward to seeing you there.
All right. Thanks, Tammy. Good talking with you.
All right.